Today's episode of Gold Star Stories is a powerful and deeply personal one. I'm speaking with Nicole, a Marine Corps mom, teacher, and advocate about her son, Sergeant Colin Arslanbas. Colin was a Recon Marine, a brother, a husband. He married his middle school sweetheart, Gracie. They were expecting their first child when Colin's life was tragically cut short during a training exercise that should never have unfolded the way it did. This is a story about more than loss. It's about love, leadership failures, silence, and a mother's determination to speak the truth. Nicole brings Colin to life through her words, his humor, his strength, his loyalty, and she reminds us that every fallen service member leaves behind far more than a name on a list. Due to production issues, we weren't able to film our usual intro and outro for this episode. We hope to have that resolved soon, but we can only do it with your help. If this story moves you, please consider supporting us by sharing it, spreading the word, or helping us continue to tell these stories. Remember Colin's name, share his story, and never forget what was lost.
Marine Captain Brian Letendre died earlier this month in an explosion in Iraq. He was 27, a husband and father, and he was buried in Arlington National Cemetery, a few miles from where he grew up. As America observes Memorial Day,
I have been directed by the President of the United States and the Commandant of the Marine Corps to inform you that today at 0530, your son was killed in action while in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom.
Not very many of us can accomplish our goals or our dreams, and he always knew where he wanted to go, and he did it.
A Gold Star family is one who has lost a loved one serving in the United States military. It's a distinction no family ever seeks, a bond shared through sacrifice, remembrance, and profound loss. I'm Nick Letendre, and I've been a Gold Star sibling for over 18 years. In those 18 years, I've learned that while ceremonies fade, medals are stored away, and life continues, the story doesn't end for the families left behind. This podcast is dedicated to remembering those who gave everything for their country and to telling the lesser-known stories, the quiet, powerful journeys of grief, strength, resilience, and hope that follows after the flags are folded and the crowds disperse. These are Gold Star Stories. Nicole, thank you again so much for speaking to me today. And can you tell me just a little bit about your son? I'd like to get to know him as a person before he joined.
Yeah, so Colin was my oldest son, and he enlisted in the Marine Corps in 2019. He tried a semester of college, and I think what set him over the edge was that his English teacher was asking him to do community service. And he was like, I am not working for anybody for free. I don't care who you are. I am not working for free. And we kind of laugh about it. Like that was the icing on the cake, but I think he wasn't interested in going to school, but he just felt like that's what he should be doing. And, for us, he wanted to go to the University of Missouri, but we're like, this is a bad financial investment. Like he loved to have a good time. He had great friends. He made everybody laugh. And I mean, he was really just the life of the party, right? And even when everything is so serious, Colin always has something inappropriate to say that would make everybody laugh. So he had a way of like really lighting up the room. Like, it's so cliche. Like everybody always says that, it's people like him, like it's, the best people die young. And truly, like Colin really was the best person. He had recently gotten married to his middle school sweetheart, but all through high school, he dated a lot of girls. And, when he was a young Marine, he dated around, but he always loved who ended up being his wife, Gracie. I remember in high school saying, well, you've got a type, don't you? And I think he dated half the dance team, but he said, my type is Gracie. And that was it. And so I always think back to that. Like he always loved her and wanted to, have her in his life. And so I was really happy for him when they got married. And, she was just supposed to go down for a weekend visit and spend some time with him. And he ended up taking leave because they weren't done with each other. And so she was traveling back. He took leave. He went back with her. And I mean, they were inseparable since. So,
And how old were they when they got married?
Colin he was 21.
Okay.
Yep.
And how old was he when he died?
22. He was
22.
just about to turn 23.
Gotcha. So how long were they married then?
Just 14 months.
14 months. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
It's a tough one.
Yeah. They were expecting a baby. Like they had just found out they were pregnant. And they were, they planned to have babies young. Like they knew they wanted to have babies right away, but they were going to wait until after his first deployment and then have a family. So we were really surprised when they called and said they were expecting a baby.
So can you tell me a little bit more about Colin growing up? Like, what was he like as a kid? Like, he had siblings, correct? You said he was the
Yeah.
oldest. So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about the family dynamic and like how he was, between siblings and stuff.
Okay, so Colin was he was 100% the oldest child, right? Like he was in charge of everything. When he was little, he loved to play video games. And so he got along great with his brother because my other son, Cole, he would play video games with Cole, or so he thought. But Colin would never plug in Cole's controller. Well, once Cole figured this out, then the two of them would just bicker and but they had a lot of things in common. They loved to play like little Lego Star Wars, and they always played Star Wars games and like had blasters, and it was a busy house.
What was the age difference between the two of them?
Just about 3 years.
3 years. Okay, that's a
Yeah,
good age
and
difference.
then yeah, and then with my daughter, she was 3 years from my second son, so 6 years between Colin and Caroline. But Colin was really busy. He played baseball. He loved baseball, and then we did travel ball. And it was funny because when he played in the outfield. He was really fast. He could run so fast. And when he went to boot camp, he wrote in a letter, "Well, you can tell who the baseball players were because we can throw grenades a lot further." So
That's pretty cool.
yeah.
Can you tell me, I know this is one of the harder stories to tell, obviously, but can you tell me the moment you got the knock on the door?
So I am a teacher, and I went to school early that morning. We were starting some testing, and I had some things that I had to do early. So I went to work, and I was just about to go into a meeting, and my husband called. And at first I thought it was weird that he called because he's not usually up that early. And so I picked up, and I was kind of short with him. I was like, "What's up?" He's like, "Are you busy?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm about to go into a meeting," and he's talking slow and very methodical. And he said, "Well, there's some Marines here, and they need to talk to us." And I was like, "Why are the Marines there?" And he's like, "I don't know. They need to talk to us." I knew that the Marines don't just show up at your door. But I also knew Colin was just preparing for deployment. He hadn't actually deployed yet. So for the life of me, I thought, maybe Colin got hurt, or maybe, I don't know. I just, my brain couldn't go that why the Marines show up at your door. But so I left work, and I stopped in the office at my school, and I think the way that I looked, the two women were in the office, and somebody said, "I'm going to drive you home." So she drove me home, and I just remember the whole car ride just saying out loud, "Please be okay, please be okay, please be okay." And I just couldn't, I mean, what could have happened, right? Like they hadn't even left yet. What could have happened? And when I got out of the car, I saw the Marines van, and they got out of the van right away. And I remember like I was out of breath, and I said, is he okay?" and they said to me, "It'll be okay, ma'am." And I was like, "That's not what I asked you. I said, is he okay?" And, from then I can't tell you anything else that was said. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what they said to me. Like, I just go blank from there. I know I was still outside and I was in the grass, and my neighbor had come over. I guess I was screaming outside, and so the neighbor heard. And he's also a Marine, and so he said he just knew right away, like, that what had happened. But we all went in the house, and I just remember they were talking, but they couldn't tell me anything. And I thought, surely they've got the wrong person. Like, Colin, there's no way. There's no way this could have been him. So, I don't know. They stayed for a long time, but I don't feel like they really even said anything.
I understand exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
It turns into a blur because in your
Yes.
mind, there's 3 million things going on in your head, and
Yes.
every external thing that's coming at you, you're like, I hear it, but I'm not
Right.
comprehending it. It's just going
Yeah.
in one ear, and it's just that's where it is.
Right.
I've seen that across everybody I've spoken to.
Yeah.
It's just you get that news, and you go into shock.
Yeah.
That is what it is.
Now, my daughter was home and she heard the knock at the door. She was still in bed sleeping, and my husband had fallen asleep on the couch that night. So he was downstairs on the couch sleeping. And she said she looked out the window and she saw that there were Marines there. And we always knew no news is good news. And the Marines only show up at your house when they're delivering the news. And so she went downstairs and she woke my husband up, and he was the one that actually answered the door. So
And how old was your daughter?
she was 16.
16.
Yeah.
So she was there obviously when they gave the news, and that's how she heard it too. You have another
Yeah.
child as well. How did they hear the news?
Yeah. So Caroline, once she woke up my husband, she came back upstairs and woke up my son. They were both taking college classes, so they hadn't gone to school yet. So they just listened in, like, from upstairs. They listened in, and so that's how they heard it.
Do you mind sharing the details on how he died?
So Colin was, he's a Recon Marine, and, I don't understand all of the details to it, and we're still trying to work through that, but he was doing a halo jump. So they were supposed to drop in to a drop zone and then do like a 3-day surveillance and report back. And so they were supposed to do this in preparation for their deployment. And they were supposed to fly in from the west and drop in, but the ocean was like over to the east. But at the last minute, they changed it and they came in from the east, and so they were over the water. And what I understand is, like, your parachutes don't work the same over water as they do above land, and the winds were different. Anyway, his team of 6, only one of the guys made it to their landing zone. 2 of them landed in a swamp, and then 3 of them landed in the ocean. And we're really thankful that all 3 that landed in the ocean didn't die. They hadn't done any training with parachutes in the ocean. Well, at least 2 of them. The last one was the assistant jump master, so he had quite a bit more experience. But they said Colin probably was unconscious when he drowned. He was carrying all of the comms, and I guess coming down, his comms weren't working, which the Marines all say, well, you don't have to have that to jump. It's nice to have, but you don't have to have that. And I just, how does the comm guy not have comms? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. So there's a lot of pieces that I just can't understand. But I don't know, the Marines seem like it's, just any Tuesday. The comm guy doesn't have comms. That's fine. But then when Colin hit the water, they couldn't find him because he wasn't in the landing zone. He wasn't where he was supposed to be. And then my understanding is that the people in the helicopter never notified the ground support personnel that they were coming in from the opposite direction. So they were looking for him somewhere else. They had some rescue boats in the water, and one of the rescue boats, the engine wasn't working. The second rescue boat took in one of the guy's parachutes in the water, so that wasn't working. So it was like everything that could have gone wrong that day went wrong for Colin. He never had a chance. He never had a chance to, and that's hard for me. The Marines make, I was proud of Colin because he would always say how, well, we're better than everybody else. We do more with less equipment. Like, that's just really dumb. It's just really dumb. Like, we're expecting them to go in and do these jobs, and we're not giving them the equipment that they should have. We have an elite group of jumpers. Why don't they have the best equipment? And on that jump, they weren't wearing, it's their like their GPS tracking, their somewhere discs is what it's called. I think that's what it's called. Or somewhere pucks is what it was called. So they didn't have those on. It was the first time they had jumped and weren't wearing them because it wasn't issued by the battalion for deployment. But typically they would wear them. But if Colin would have had it on, they would have been able to find him a lot faster. So his teammate, that his dear friend, he was the one that found him. He also landed in the water, and there were 3 little coves along the shoreline. And so his friend was in the furthest one, Colin was in the middle, and then the assistant jump master was in the first cove. And so the third guy, he got himself into shore, and he was looking for Colin. He swam out to the area that he thought Colin went down in, because Colin went down first, and he didn't see him. So he swam back to shore, and then I guess it was about 300 yards. And when he was on shore, that's when he saw Colin's beacon coming off, as they wear some chem lights or something. And so then he was able to swim out again and get Colin and bring him back in.
And where exactly was this?
It was in North Carolina.
This is in North Carolina. Okay.
Yeah.
And where was he preparing to deploy to?
Well, to a ship. He was on the New York.
Okay.
So they ended up spending time in Greece, but when he was deploying, like, we had no idea where he was going.
Right.
Yeah.
So I know there's, a lot of it is a blur, and a lot of it is things that we remember from stories of other people or pictures that we saw that kind of bring us back in. But with the best of your memory, can you give me kind of a recap of the days following, as far as after the knock? What do you remember was the next steps?
So the night Colin died was the night that the new Taylor Swift album was released. So I stayed up all night waiting to hear her new album. And then I went to work. After we got the call, my biggest thing was I just wanted to see Colin. And so I had called the hospital that he was at, and they said, yep, you'll be able to see him. I got in the car. I think, within 2 hours, I was in the car driving to North Carolina, because I needed to see Colin. I needed to know that they got this right, because it just didn't seem like, how in the world could this happen? And, the Keiko that came to deliver the news, he had no information. So I drove to North Carolina. It was about 9-hour drive for me. And I I don't know how I got there because I usually, I drive 30 minutes and I'm tired and like, I don't like to drive. But my daughter-in-law was up there and I thought, how on earth can we plan a funeral like separately? That's not something that I wanted to do on FaceTime. And I needed to be with her, before when we said our goodbyes to Colin. His biggest concern was since she was newly pregnant, that she was going to have to do a lot of things herself. They were planning on buying a house, and he was worried about her having to move everything. And I told him, I was like, no, don't worry about her. We'll help her. We'll take care of her, like whatever she needs. And she has a great supportive family too. But I just knew I needed to be there with her to honor him and also to be able to see him. So I got there, it was pretty late that night. And then I just remember we were all trying to sleep. Her family had arrived in, and we were all trying to sleep in their little 1-bedroom apartment. And, there's air mattress everywhere. And I don't know, it was just really hard to be in that space. But, every day they kept telling me that I would be able to see Colin. And then another Keiko was involved too. And he was like, well, they're just not prepared for that at the hospital. It's not a good place. I don't know why they would have told you that, but you won't be able to see him. And like, that was really hard for me because if somebody had told me, well, ma'am, his uniform isn't squared away. And I thought, well, I don't want to see him in his uniform anyway. Like, that is the least of my concerns. Like, I never wanted to see a uniform ever again. But, after a couple of days, once he was brought back he was like up in northern North Carolina, when he was brought back, and at the funeral home did let us go and see him. So, and I was able to help get him dressed, and, we put him in clothes that he would have loved. So,
Um, so once you finally got to see him, getting all the funeral plans and all that kind of stuff together, I know it puts a lot onto his wife. I'm sure you
yeah.
had a lot of pressure on you as well. Did you feel like you had a lot of community support at that same time? Did you guys get that like community uplifting?
We did. At first it was really hard because there were several like fake GoFundMe's that were set up. And
Really?
yes,
That is
yes,
absolutely absurd.
yes. And so we decided as a family, like, none of us were ready. The media was interested too. And we had decided as a family that we weren't ready. We didn't know what happened to him. So we couldn't even talk about that. And it was just so overwhelming. So we decided as a family that none of us were going to be speaking to media. And like we had to quickly designate like a point person that said like, okay, no money, like the family is not asking for any money or anything, because it just got really out of control really fast. So we stayed in North Carolina, and the rest of my family joined me after a couple of days, because the Marine Corps wanted to have a service there for him. So he died on a Thursday, and so the following Thursday they had a service for him, and it was beautiful and terrible, and yeah, I don't I don't know how you prepare for that. So many people that wanted to come and say hello, and our biggest concern, like going back to the couple days after that, is the colonel. Let me think about this for a second. Yes, Colonel Mahar. He was the one who was in charge of the deployment. I can't think of what his. there's an official role. I can't remember what it's called though. But anyway, he had called and left us a voicemail, and he said, if you need anything, please call me on this number. I'll be able to answer it on the ship. And our Keiko had said, hey, if you want something, you can always ask. They can tell you no, but if the mother is the one asking, like, they're going to try to make it happen. And so our biggest thing was I wanted his team to be able to be there because they're young Marines and I was worried about them. And we couldn't do anything to bring Colin back, but I knew I needed to see these guys to make sure that they're okay. And, they told us that they were trying to keep them on the ship and, get them back to work as quickly as possible. That's what's best for them. They need to work. And if they got off the boat that, they might drink or they might make questionable decisions. But our biggest thing was we just need to have them here with us. I needed to be able to see them and know that they're okay. And then for my daughter-in-law, this was the biggest, most important thing, was to get them off the boat and allow them to be there with us. So his whole team was able to be there, which we were happy with. But then it turned into the whole Alpha company was able to get off the boat. So we were thankful for that. And my daughter-in-law and I were able to be there to welcome everybody back at the battalion. We were able to be there and, just say our hellos to everybody. And there were people that I really wanted to meet that I had heard their names and just needed to be able to, thank them for everything that they did for Colin. So.
How did everybody else in the family handle this? I mean, did everybody kind of do their own thing? It seems like you went off and you were able to be with her and everybody else was at home. When did they join back up with you?
Yeah, that was really hard because I've like never felt like such a terrible mother because I needed to be there for everybody, but it wasn't important to them to see Colin, and they didn't want to go up there. They didn't want to be part of it. My husband didn't want to be part of it. So I went by myself, and I didn't really put a lot of thought into it. I apologized when I was leaving. Like, I'm sorry, but I need to do this. I need to be there. I need to see him. And I think they understood. But I felt terrible. I knew it was really hard for them. And I should have been there for them, but my mother-in-law and father-in-law and then my two sister-in-laws, they flew in, and so they helped with my family, and they were able to take the kids shopping and make sure that they had appropriate attire to wear for his funeral. And so I was very thankful for them. And so
it's kind of a testament to how everybody else has to grieve, though. We all go off on our own things, and I know my mom did things that she just absolutely had to do. There's no telling her otherwise.
Yep.
This was in her mind. This was what was going to possibly give her that closure or something that she was looking for. She was just so desperately grasping for anything to make it feel better.
Yes.
And I sympathize with you on that, and I'm sure your family understands as well. I didn't bring that story up as a question of to try to point that at you by any means. It was more so to shed light on how much you're hurting, because I could tell you picked up and left. You were just like, there's no thought process behind this. I just got to get there. And that's a 100% testament of any mother's love, because just about every mom that I've spoken to has said that same thing. It's like, I don't care what the hell I was doing. I dropped what I was doing and I made myself get there. And that's just very intense. So I feel for you. I absolutely feel for you. We're coming on how many years now?
2 years. Well, not even. We just passed our 1 year mark. It's very fresh.
Do you have any plans moving forward as far as plans to keep his memory alive? I know a lot of families start to try to think how they're going to do things. And for me, I got I got overwhelmed by memorial things. That's why I'm doing this 19 years later,
Yeah.
because I just couldn't. There's just was not enough energy. There was not enough emotion left for me to handle it.
Mhm.
Have you guys given any thoughts on like coming up on, anniversaries or anything, things that you guys want to do in the future, maybe to get community support for?
Yeah. So, we just hit the 1 year mark, and it was really nice because the Marine Recon Foundation, they had a trip. They take all the Gold Star families to Hawaii. You get to go one time. And so we had that to kind of get through the first year. And so we just got back from that last week. It was great to be able to spend time with them. And um, going forward, what are we going to do? I don't know. There have been so many organizations that have reached out to help. There was something in North Carolina last year we were able to attend, Pedal for Troops. And then there's been motorcycle rides and all kinds of memorial things. And I wish I could be part of every one of them. Like, if people are willing to talk about Colin and honor Colin, I want to be there. And the problem is, I don't live in our hometown. We moved after he left for the Marine Corps. We moved away. And, where I live now, there's nothing. Like, they didn't know Colin. He didn't grow up here. Um, but there's so much that's happening back in our hometown. And, for Memorial Day, they're having an event, and they've asked if they can, honor Colin. And then there was a scholarship that was given in Colin's name. And I wish I could have been there for that, and I couldn't. Um, I don't know. Somehow I need to make it work. I need to find a balance between, being there for things and, just kind of supporting people from the side. But eventually, I think I would like to have our own foundation, but who do we help and what is needed? I just don't know the answer to any of that yet. So,
And I couldn't have told you until now.
yeah,
It took this long for me to realize that, like, I'm not hearing these stories.
yeah,
We hear a lot about the guys and stuff, and every now and then we'll hear one of the family stories. But for me, this sacrifice goes so much further than just their sacrifice. It goes into the family sacrifices. I mean, look at how this has changed your life, and everybody else's lives that have been involved. If if the sacrifice itself wasn't enough to give somebody pause, then I would like to at least say, hey, look at the further impact of the families that, that war has, you know what I mean? And I like to say, I'm not like anti-war, like, hey, I'm not, my brother was a badass Marine.
yeah,
I'm not allowed to be anti-war, but I am allowed to say, let's friggin' pause. You know what I mean? Because there is so much value in that life
hmm,
that maybe there's another option. Maybe by sharing these stories, it'll give somebody pause for a second and just say, hey, let's think of another option. Oh, maybe I'm crazy. Ambitious, but that's, at this point, it's just like, you feel like you're trying anything you can just to
yeah,
make everybody else see
yeah.
how important and serious this is, because it's still, backyard barbecues for a lot of people.
You're right.
And it
I
just
knew
changes.
I knew Colin's job was a dangerous job, and so I knew training also is dangerous because they're training to do these really hard things, and Colin loved it and he was good at it. And he's exactly who should have been at that job, but it did have an inherent risk. It was dangerous. Training is dangerous, and it really hurt. I made a mistake of getting on and reading comments on all of the articles that were posted about him, and people would say, "Oh, killed in training, what a waste." Well, I like to think that he died doing something that he loved, and I think people just don't recognize that the training that they're doing is dangerous so that they can do these dangerous jobs that other people just aren't willing to do. So, it's I should
The-
never read comments.
Nope. It is the worst. And that's really that's a lot of the reason why it took me so long to go fully public with this because it's really hard. It is
Yeah.
really hard to read some of these comments, or for me, I feel like I constantly would post things and then feel like I got corrected by somebody that knew more than I did.
Yeah.
Um, and I could sense a little bit of that in you, and you're like, I telling the story, you're like, I'm not sure of some of the terminology. For me,
Yes.
I didn't use the terminology at all because I got corrected so many times by people that I was just like, I know my story. I'm going to keep my story in my heart how it is, and I don't want to
Yeah.
change it anymore.
I didn't sign up to be a Marine. Like, we got dragged along with Colin, so I don't have to call people by their rank. You
Exactly.
know what I mean? Like, I don't have to do that. And if I don't understand it, then it's because the Marine Corps didn't do a good job of explaining it. We have this big fat report of what happened to Colin, but I can't understand any of it. I'm not a Marine. I don't understand what this report says. So we've relied on other people to try to explain it to us. And, um, a lot of people aren't supposed to be speaking about what happened yet. So it's been really hard to get the information straight. So I don't quite understand it. What I do understand is it was a training mission. It could have waited until tomorrow. It didn't have to happen that night. When the weather shifted, they should have also waited until tomorrow. If it wasn't safe, they said, but these guys, somebody was quoted in the report saying that, well, these are like good jumpers and they make extra money every month. They make an extra $200 a month because they're good jumpers. Well, I hope it was worth it. And I asked somebody else too, that was at Colin's service that was there that night. I said, what would you have done differently given the choice? So what would you have done differently? And he looked right at me and he said, well, I've already provided the feedback for the report. And I was like, okay, yeah, but I'm just wondering what would you actually have done different? And he said, I wouldn't have done anything different. And I was like, there's a Marine dead and you're the team leader. So I sure hope that you're going to find a way to do something different in the future. Whether it was Colin's fault or somebody else's fault or, all of these terrible things that made it so that Colin couldn't be saved. There were mistakes made. And I just hope that Colin's not just another number to the Marine Corps.
The only thing more tragic would be for them to have not learned the lesson that Colin
Exactly.
gave them.
Exactly. And so some days I feel really passionate about it. Like, I need to be doing something. I need to contact somebody and somebody has to hear me and somebody has to take an interest in this so that they don't kill anybody else. But then sometimes I'm like, I already lost Colin. I did my part. Like, if they don't care, then I don't care. But I do care about Colin's team and I care about every young Marine, who due to the culture or whatever the reason, if they feel like they can't speak up, if they're in an unsafe situation and they can't speak up, then I feel like, well, I didn't sign up for this. So it is my job to speak a little bit louder and say the things that these Marines, they're not allowed to say, you know, they're threatened with losing rank or, you know, why can't they just tell the truth? Why can't they just say what happened that night? I don't understand it. And it's not just Colin's accident. It's, you know, leaving Afghanistan, for a long time, those guys couldn't talk either.
Mhm.
So who's going to be the voice for all these people if the ones who have the answers aren't allowed to talk? It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Have you had a chance to connect with TAPS at all?
I have, but I haven't found them particularly helpful. I went to one TAPS meeting and there was one other mom that was there, and she was very, very nice. Her son, he died by suicide, and we couldn't really relate to each other very much. I don't know. It's still a death, and but Colin loved his life, and not to say that somebody who died by suicide didn't have other great things, but I just had a hard time connecting with her. I'd like to give it another chance with TAPS. You know, they've been very nice. They've reached out several times. I think I kind of haven't been in the space to, you know, be able to get their help either.
It took me years.
Yeah.
And when I finally reached out to them, I was a musician at the time. So my way of reaching out was like, can I go play music for you guys? And I think they may have just seen through it and was like, yep, come on. It was the most healing thing for me. And I
Yeah.
would absolutely recommend it for his siblings as well, if they get a chance.
Yeah.
Just to be able to go talk to somebody else, other siblings, other moms that have been through it, and you realize I'm not crazy. That
Yeah.
that the value in that feeling of like validation is just, it was everything for me at that point. And I
Yeah.
realized that you may be too close to it, but at some point, just keep your head open to it, and
Yeah.
um, there will be the right time for it. It is they're a magical organization that nobody wants to be part of,
Right.
and then they 100% have their place for it. Um, I'm sorry, is that your only experience with another Gold Star mother so far? Was just that one?
No,
Okay.
actually, so that trip to Hawaii, so we went out there with the Recon Foundation, and there were 5 families there that went to Hawaii. But a couple days before that, we were in California, and there were several Gold Star families there. So my kids got to talk with other siblings, and I got to talk with other mothers. My husband got to talk with other fathers. So it was really nice and a really good environment. And, you know, they've said that they'll take care of us, right? Like we're family. And we have really felt it from them. Like their organization has been amazing. So, yeah, and I don't know, I find a lot of comfort with them. And, you know, there's been other moms that reached out to me very early on. And, you know, I've just been very thankful for them, you know, and their sons have died in similar ways. And, you know, this group in the Marine Corps is different, right? They, I don't know, they didn't have the same haircuts, and you know they were kind of a little more lax about some things, but um, they were good Marines. I don't know. Like whenever we had to deal with the big Marine Corps, like all the formalities of it, you know, when I would talk to our Keiko, who was wonderful, but he would give me the big Marine Corps answer. But then I can ask these guys, like, okay, but how is it really? And they would shoot straight with us. So, you know, it's been really good being part of that organization, and you know, talking with those families that understood like more what Colin's life was like and what his leadership was like.
I spoke recently with another mom, and it was basically like, a lot of times when people from the outside think about my brother, I think they think of him as like G.I. Joe action figure, prim and proper. And that's just so far from the truth. Like, I know exactly who my brother was. He was the one that, was, farting in my grandfather's nursing home and blaming it on me. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like, he was hilarious. I would laugh all the time. So I don't like necessarily that all of my memories or the memories that other people put out of him are so proper, because that's just
Yeah,
not. He was a real person. He was more than just a Marine, and
you're
I
right.
really strive to make sure that that is seen by everybody in general. Media does a really good job of just making them a number. I mean, it, it's tough. And obviously, I mean, there's exceptions to that rule, but the further we get away from it, it just feels less personal. And I want to make sure that their personalities are preserved for future generations. I'm
Hmm.
sure he's going to have nieces and nephews in the future that are going to want to know about him,
Right.
and they're going to want to listen to grandma tell that story, not somebody else.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of value in that news companies aren't going to necessarily be able to compete with on. Is there any other stories you'd like to share with us on?
So
Oh,
you said your brother was a Keiko, or maybe I watched that, but what was
yes.
his MOS?
He was infantry.
Okay.
Yep, he was an infantry officer, and then was actually at a Connecticut Reserve Unit, training a reserve unit, and volunteered to go back over in 2006. So he didn't even have to go, but kind of person he was. So
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, very common theme through a lot of these stories. These are the best of the best, and like you said, only the good die young. So,
Yep.
any other stories you'd like to share with me today?
Um, I feel like I could go on forever talking about Colin. You
I
know,
understand that. And
he
I like to tell everybody too, I'm open to everybody coming back later. If you ever find yourself, I live in a beautiful location in Florida called Satellite Beach. I get to see rocket launches and stuff from my
I'm in
driveway.
Orlando.
Are you
We could have
really?
done this in person.
No shit. Well, I interviewed another Gold Star, too. So, well, that's cool. If you
Yeah.
ever get a chance to come by, then I'd love to do it in person at some point.
Okay.
Um, and we have more, it's easier to connect in person, but there's so many stories to share. We can't just break this
Yeah.
down in 45 minutes and say that
Right.
was that was the life. And well, that's cool. I should have asked you where you were before, I guess, but
That's funny. You know what I did want to mention about when we brought Colin home. Home to us back then was to St. Louis,
Mhm.
and our whole city showed up for him to come home. Like he got off the plane, and there were helicopters circling over, and it was a big news story, and they shut down the highway and the Patriot Guard, I mean, for miles, they were lined up. And we had the biggest procession. People were on the side of the road waving their flags. His swim team, when he was in high school, like actually from the time he was a little guy, he was on like the summer swim team. And so we would see like their signs on the side of the road, and his baseball friends, they were there. I mean, the whole city showed up to welcome him home. And I just felt so overwhelmed and so thankful for our city for showing up. When somebody first mentioned it, that, we could have the Patriot Guard riders, I was like, thank you for the information, but that just seems like a bit much. Colin wasn't one to draw attention to himself. They had a quiet, private wedding on the beach. He never wanted to have a graduation party or a going away party. Like, he just wasn't all about the spotlight. And so the fact that this was his, funeral procession, it was insane. But somebody said this will be really good. It'll be healing for you. And it was, because at the time I felt so alone. Like, I'm hurting. I'm the only one, outside of our family.
Mhm.
But his death affected so many people. And I saw news interviews where people kept their kids home from school, and they talked about how important it was to, see him come home. And I just so appreciated that. I appreciated all of the support that we had at the time. So,
I do remember the Patriot Guards coming through with my brother too. We had the same experience. Thousands of people lining the streets, had helicopters flying over our house, and you're just like, that to me was just so much. That was also the moment my dad took. I very vividly remember this. Like right after my brother's casket passed by my house, my dad went and took our blue star magnet off of our car and replaced it with a gold star one.
yeah.
And that was the first time I found out what that actually meant. I had no idea until they changed it, and I was like, what did we do that for?
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that you're trying to bring attention to this, because when we were in Hawaii last week, somebody asked me, like, what is this group? Who are you with? Because we had special treatment. We had gone to Pearl Harbor, and we had special treatment. And at a restaurant, we were recognized by somebody who was also there. And I said, well, we're Gold Star families. And she said, wow, you're so lucky. And I was like, ma'am, my son is dead.
So many people don't understand it. I was going to mention
They just
something.
don't know. And I felt bad for, it was so inappropriate for me to be like, my son is dead, but
I get it though. There's no good way to drop it to them. You know what I
yeah,
mean? They're going to feel bad regardless.
I
The
know.
the best, no, you're fine. Trust me. The amount of times I have done that to people is, my wife can attest. Every single time somebody asks, "Are you a veteran?" I say, "No, I'm a Gold Star sibling." And then they look at me and they say, "Congratulations." And then I fill them in on it and make them feel like shit. But look,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to make them feel bad necessarily, but also there should be awareness. I mean, the fact that it is still so unknown to
Yeah.
the vast majority of people
Right.
is just mind-boggling to me. And it's because right now we're in a relative time of peace.
Yeah.
Nobody's thinking about it, but who knows when the hell that could change. I could go on and on again.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think it's important to bring awareness to it, even if it's not even just us. But I think all of the Gold Star families, like, we all deserve people to at least know that when we say we're a Gold Star family, that you don't tell me congratulations.
Yep, I think that's a bare minimum.
Yeah.
If that's what we can get, I'll take that. Nicole, thank you for your honesty, your strength, and for giving us a glimpse into the world that so many never see. What you shared today is the exact reason we do this podcast, not just for awareness, but for accountability, connection, and remembrance. If you've been moved by this episode, I encourage you to say Colin's name, share his story, follow Nicole's lead, and speak a little louder on behalf of those who can't. And if you're a Gold Star family listening, this space is for you. Your story matters here. And now, as we always do, we raise a glass to Colin. To Colin, who lit up rooms with inappropriate jokes, who outran teammates in the outfield, and who carried more than just his own weight into the fight. You were a Recon Marine, part of an elite few, but you were also a big brother, a husband, and a soon-to-be father. And that's the part that rips through us. You were doing what you loved, but you shouldn't have had to do it with faulty comms, broken rescue boats, and last-minute mission changes. Your mom said it best. You never had a chance that day, but you deserved one. And so here's to you, Colin. We honor you by remembering the jokes, the chaos, the passion, and the people you loved most. We honor you by refusing to accept silence as closure, by demanding better for your brothers in arms and for every Marine that follows in your footsteps. You are not forgotten. You are not a number. You are not just training. We say your name, we carry your story, and we fight like hell to make sure your legacy isn't lost in bureaucracy. Say their name, Sergeant Colin Arslanbas. A special thank you to our Gold Star Story supporters: Terry Mullins, Danielle Mettle, Jackie Mullins, June Letendre, Edie Howard, Bob and Pat Scott, Mary Jo Stoy, and Helen Krupp. Thank you, and if you would like to support our stories, you can visit goldstarsstoriesusa.com or visit buymeacoffee.com/goldstarstories. If you prefer Cash App, you can donate at Gold Star Stories. Thank you again for listening. Remember to look after your people, and we'll see you next time on Gold Star Stories.